Few things better illustrate the folly of strictly self-interested, individualistic rationalism than driving on the freeway. And I mean that both practically as well as an allegory. I spent most of today driving. On a regular basis, I drive a friend to a medical appointment in the Greater Toronto area. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Toronto, well, it's a very, very large city. It is so large that it's swallowed up a number of surrounding communities, and it's also home to North America's widest highways. At one point, the 401 is 18 lanes wide. And driving in the middle of it's utterly mad. It feels insane just being surrounded by this many cars, most of us going this way, some of us going that way, and on either side there's just so much pavement with so many different streams of cars going in the same direction. I didn't go down the 401 today, I went down the 403 and the QEW, but the feeling is quite the same. And the closer you get to Toronto, the more intense the experience gets. I live about 2 hours away from there, and the highways and the streets around here are relatively tame by comparison. But as you just cross that boundary towards Hamilton and into the Greater Toronto area, it ratchets up significantly, both my stress level as well as the erraticness of the people around you. First, I'm just going to kind of glaze over the practical reasons why rational self-interest, individualism is a bad idea. And that's because, well, this road is a product of this ideology. The very idea that everyone has to have their own castle in the suburbs and their own individual car to get from their castle in the suburbs to their job or, the mall or any other of the amenities that are too far away from their home because the subdivision that they live in is not designed for full living. Yeah, that whole thing, that's a topic for another episode. I could go on and on about the design of cities and the design of our world at length, but I'm more interested here in the allegory. I'm more interested in the deep thoughts that I was having while driving white knuckle down the QEW. Now, I'm a very careful driver, a conscientious driver, but I'm also a fast driver. I tend to drive a little bit above the speed limit most of the time, and I'm one of those folks that likes to keep moving, likes to pass the majority of traffic. Sorry, Mom, it doesn't feel right just bogging it in the slow lane. But anyway, even though I am driving relatively fast, I'm not one of those drivers that's weaving in and out of traffic and tailgating and slamming on the brakes and that sort of thing, because not only is that incredibly dangerous, Mom, but also it's detrimental, not just to other people, but also to yourself. If you're trying to get anywhere fast, that kind of aggressive behavior just doesn't really do well for anybody. And yes, if you're hurtling down the highway at 140, 150, you're likely going to get there faster than I am, because I certainly don't go anywhere near that fast. But when one is stuck in even a little bit of traffic, it's usually the people that are driving aggressively like that end up causing the traffic jams, and certainly don't fare any better in those traffic jams. When a road is relatively empty, few cars on the road, you can basically travel as fast as the cars can go. My car, I think, would go about 160, 170. In theory, if there's nobody else on the road, I could go 160, 170. I never would, because that would be scary, but still, that is theoretically possible. Even if there are a few cars on the road, as long as everybody's going the same speed, you can basically go as fast as the cars will go. If everyone on the 401 were going 160, God forbid, you could all theoretically get there in one piece, as long as everybody keeps their eyes on the road and does everything necessary to get there. As you start to increase the number of cars on the road, though, this gets a little bit more difficult, because you're getting a little bit closer, bumper to bumper, to the person in front of you, and the person behind you is getting a little closer to your back bumper. Now, assuming perfect drivers, assuming that everybody has perfect reflexes, perfect control over the vehicle, perfect conditions, there's no mechanical breakdowns or anything like that, even if you had literally bumper to bumper traffic, like people's bumpers are almost touching, you could still be going 160. You still could be going as fast as the cars could go. But obviously we're not perfect creatures, and the conditions are never perfect. The ride is never as ideal as it could be. So the reasonable thing to do is drive according to conditions. Drive in such a way that if something bad were to happen ahead of you, you would have time to be able to notice, react, and slow down your vehicle in order to not crush whatever is ahead of you. The general guideline for this is about 2 seconds worth of distance between you and the person ahead of you, but that depends on different conditions and yada yada yada. If everybody follows this guideline, if everybody stays a significant distance from one another, yeah, you can basically go as fast as the cars will take you. But if somebody's not following those guidelines, that's where we start running into troubles. You've probably been driving down the freeway at some point and you see somebody just like rocketing ahead, weaving back and forth in traffic and tailgating people and then slamming on the brakes when anything slows down ahead of them and driving all erratically and they're obviously going very fast. They're trying to get somewhere very quickly, but they're driving faster than the flow of traffic. And as such, they have to do extra maneuvering in order to get where they're going. This is what I'm proposing is the example of the strictly self-interested individualistic rationalist. This person who sees that the most important thing is that they get to their destination as fast as possible, barring no other concerns. Now, on the surface, this whole behavior seems very reasonable, very rational. You're trying to get where you're going as fast as possible, so just drive as fast as possible and, weave back and forth, and you've got the reflexes, you've got the abilities to be able to handle this, so, go nuts, do whatever, pretend like you're in Grand Theft Auto, sure. But the trouble is that not everybody has the same reflexes. Not everybody has a car that's able to react quite as quickly as your vehicle is able to. So sometimes when you swerve in front of them and suddenly slow down, well, they have to tap their brakes a little bit because they're scared of running into you. And when they tap their brakes, the person behind them also taps their brakes a little bit, possibly a little bit more. The people behind that see this and, I better slow down a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And this wave starts where you just have one person tapping their brakes slightly. And then all of a sudden you've got this phantom traffic jam. When people's cars are close enough together and one person taps on their brake, the entire highway could actually grind to a complete halt, where people's cars are literally stopped on the freeway, even though there was never any obstacle, never any crash, never any actual reason for it. It's just this group effect of everyone having to slow down a little bit more, a little bit lower, a little bit more. Eventually, this culminates in a slowdown to a stop. And when you run into these sort of bumper-to-bumper situations, that guy, the strictly self-interested individualistic rationalist, well, he's still doing that thing. He's still bouncing back and forth between lanes. Oh, this lane is going a little bit faster. I'm just going to jump over there. And this amplifies the effect. It causes the slowdown to get even worse. It causes the traffic jam behind them to get even worse because there's yet another wave passing backward through this traffic. And most times, due to the selection bias, that other lane, that lane change actually isn't all that effective. They're not actually gaining up any ground, and also it's like stop and go, stop and go, stop and go, which, it may feel like you're going fast, but on the average, you're not going fast. You're actually going the same speed that everybody else is because you're stuck behind everybody else. So this is obviously an economic allegory. If we're living in a society where this is the dominant model for economic behavior, the way that we're supposed to act rationally in the market, and the way that the market is designed for us to act in, well, this is the kind of behavior that we get. We get folks that are attempting to rationally maximize their utility. They're trying to get as fast as possible to where they're going without concern for any other factors. So this could be like accumulating wealth, accumulating material possessions without regard for the environment, without regard for the conditions in which the material goods are created, without regard for the needs of their neighbors, without regard for any other concept other than their own personal self-interest and perhaps that of their family and immediate loved ones. And what's worse, the market is designed with people like this in mind. The whole behavior of the stock market, the whole behavior of all the mechanisms, the modeling, the economic policy government-wise is designed with us being as these rational, strictly self-interested individualists by default. Even if we're not that, that's how our behavior is being modeled by the system that's been put in place. And by modeling us that way, well, it turns us into that. It makes us act that way because that's the easy way to go. That's how you're supposed to do it. And I guess at the risk of torturing this metaphor, that's kind of the design of the highway too. That's the way that we've designed our cities and our states and our highways and our countries in such a way that we all have to be interested rationally in getting where we want to go as fast as possible without regard for anything else. And this is why we don't have very good public transportation. It's why we don't have mass transportation like high-speed trains, especially in North America. The trains in Canada, like the Via Rail, it's so expensive and underfunded, and the infrastructure is so bad that you can't get to most Canadian places, especially out west. How could we be doing this differently? How could we fix this? Well, let's go back to the traffic jam. I was briefly involved in a traffic jam today. There was a slowdown just leaving the Toronto area where it got a little bit dense, and then things got down to about 80 kilometers an hour, 60 kilometers an hour, and then boom, we stopped. And then it started back up again. I was in one of these waves. My strategy in this is usually to be as altruistic as possible in my driving. And so rather than trying to get as fast as possible where I'm going, I leave lots of space. I leave enough space between me and the person in front of me that if they suddenly stop, I've got 5-10 seconds, if not more, to be able to stop. And the side effect of this being that if somebody needs to change lanes or enter the highway or leave the highway or something like that, there's plenty of room in front of me. They can just go right ahead and do that. And I'm not trying to get ahead of them. I'm not trying to beat those people, and neither am I getting annoyed at the people that are passing me because I'm still getting where I'm going. I'm not actually going any slower than any of them. And in fact, I actually noticed a number of those folks that I ended up passing them eventually. The folks that went rocketing past me in the left lane, well, here I am in the right lane just driving along like a tortoise, and I got there a bit faster than they did. They're stuck in this backup on the left lane with a whole bunch of very expensive cars and very macho men. And the effect of this is seen in my rear view mirror. Whereas the people in front of me had to stop, I didn't actually have to stop at any point on the highway, and the person after me didn't have to stop either. In fact, they barely had to slow down because they were also following me at a decent distance. By just me doing this, the lane that I was in for, quite some time behind me was actually clear. There was no more pileup in my lane, although the other two lanes on the other side, there still was. This wasn't actually costing me any time. I wasn't actually losing anything by being generous in my driving, by being outwardly courteous to all the people around me. And certainly nobody else was inconvenienced either. In fact, I'm pretty sure the people behind me were appreciative of the fact that they didn't have to slam on their brakes and then accelerate, slam on their brakes, accelerate. They still got where they were going as fast as I did, and I still got going where I was going as fast as the people in front of me did, except I had a smoother ride, and so did the people behind me. To jump to the other side of this allegory, yes, this could be a metaphor for charity, but I don't exactly see it as that. It's more about a general orientation towards others, thinking and feeling in such a way as seeing not them as obstacles to getting where I want to go, but rather as co-journeyers, people that are also on the same road to my destination. It's not so much that I'm doing this for the people behind me. I'm not doing it because I feel bad for them and I want them to thank me or something like that. I'm more just concerned about having an okay day, just getting through this drive without anybody dying. And it is a fairly simple matter just to act in such a way as not to intentionally or unintentionally cause other people frustration, inconvenience, or potentially death. Now, of course, there's limits to what the individual can do. We're still driving down a highway that's designed for personal automobiles and a world that's designed for personal automobiles, and we're kind of stuck in our own personal automobiles. We don't really have the option of doing anything else because no such option exists. So we could definitely be doing better at that. We could be doing some structural changes so that we don't have to take these actions. We don't have to behave in such a way as to solve the rational, self-interested, individualistic reasoning of the people around us if the world weren't designed so that that was the ultimate good. Now, of course, some of you are probably thinking like, well, that's just human nature. That's just the way people are. They're always just going to do that. But is that really true? Is that really what natural human nature is? Is that what every single human being has at their core? I don't think so. I think this is a learned behavior. I think this is something that we've been conditioned into by having to drive down these highways in individualistic automobiles for our entire lives. If we don't learn how to do that, well, we don't do very well in this society. We end up homeless or impoverished or beaten down by all the people that are above us. This doesn't mean that we don't have to not act in self-interest, because yes, I was still driving somewhere, I'm still acting in self-interest, but it's self-interested in a collaborative way. I'm not simply trying to win a race, I'm not trying to get people behind me, I'm just trying to get somewhere as fast as possible. And what I think these folks that pass in and out of traffic and weave and dodge and tailgate don't realize is that if everyone were a bit better about this, if everyone didn't see themselves as the main star hero, the main character of the world, and everybody else is just NPCs in a game of Grand Theft Auto, we'd all be better off. We'd all be getting faster where we're going. We wouldn't end up with traffic jams. We wouldn't end up with crashes on the highway. We could all just be where we're going as quickly as possible. Even better if we pooled our resources and built a better transit system, built a train, well, I wouldn't have to drive at all. I could just hop on a train, get to Toronto in an hour flat, because it's going like a bullet, and away we go. We live in a socialist utopia. Anyway, I'm a little scatterbrained. I spent most of the day driving, you see, so hopefully this makes sense. Hopefully the allegory isn't too tenuous. So anyway, I do these videos daily. Some of them are better than others, and sometimes I get where I'm going, sometimes I don't. But if you like this content, could you kindly like the video and subscribe and share it, and check out some of those videos, because they might be a little coherent, more coherent than this one. And I guess I'll see you tomorrow.